Tonight, Keir Starmer fights to save his job.
It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information.
The Right Honourable Gentleman said to a previous Prime Minister at this dispatch box, if he misled the House, he must resign. Does he stand by those words?
The Prime Minister says it's staggering he wasn't told Peter Mandelson had failed security checks, but Sky News reveals that Keir Starmer ignored advice that the disgraced peer should be vetted before he was made ambassador to Washington. And there's more to come tomorrow. Ollie Robbins, the sacked civil servant at the centre of this row, tells his side of the story. Will Keir Starmer be with us for the ending? We'll ask Aisha Hazariko and Guto Harry, who'll be with me for the next hour. It's Monday. I'm Ali Fortescue, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Politics Hub. Well, it's been a very big day here in Westminster, and the Prime Minister's job is on the line, I think it's fair to say. Sir Keir Starmer has apologised again for making Peter Mandelson his man in Washington. He told MPs his judgment was wrong. He says he takes full responsibility. But his focus today was really on the mistakes of others, not his own. He said it is staggering he wasn't told that the disgraced peer had failed security checks, and if he'd known, he says he wouldn't have given him the job. But Sky News revealed today that the Prime Minister ignored advice from the Cabinet Secretary not to announce the appointment before vetting was completed. And as we know, it was already public knowledge that Mandelson had stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's home while he was in jail. And we all know, of course, and ministers have even admitted that Peter Mandelson's appointment was a risk. So MPs and the public must now decide. The Prime Minister has just fired one of his most senior civil servants. Should Keir Starmer be kicked out too? Well, our political editor, Beth Rigby, has our first report tonight.
Have you misled Parliament, Prime Minister?
Keir Starmer pledged to be a different kind of Prime Minister.
We need to clean up politics.
A leader who would restore public trust.
My government will serve you.
Through stability, accountability and integrity.
I never turn on my staff.
The Mandelson scandals helped undo all of that. The Prime Minister come into the House of Commons to explain how Lord Mandelson was made US ambassador despite failing developed security vetting. His argument clear, it was the Foreign Office's fault.
The Foreign Office officials who made that decision did not pass this information to me, to the Foreign Secretary, to her predecessor, the Deputy Prime Minister, to any other minister, or even to the former Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wormold. I found this staggering.
And had he known, he wouldn't have sent Mandelson to Washington.
If I had known before he took up his post that UKSV recommendation was that developed vetting clearance should be denied, I would not have gone ahead with the appointment.
But the PM's position hard to defend. The former public prosecutor curiously incurious over Mandelson's past.
I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
The opposition going for the jugular, pointing out the PM did not apologise for misleading the House.
Earlier today, Mr. Speaker, Downing Street admitted that the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the House. The Prime Minister has chosen not to repeat that from the dispatch box. I will remind him that under the Ministerial Code, he has a duty to correct the record at the earliest opportunity. The earliest opportunity to correct the record was Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, almost a week ago. This is a breach of the ministerial code.
And quoting Keir Starmer's own words about former PM Boris Johnson back at him.
On the 26th of January 2022, the Right Honourable Gentleman said to a previous Prime Minister at this dispatch box, if he misled the House, he must resign. Does he stand by those words, or is there one rule for him and another for everyone else?
His own bench is dissatisfied too.
This has damaged the party that I've been a member of for 50 years. I urge him to take steps to clear this toxic culture out of our party.
It's one thing to say, as he insists on saying, nobody told me. Nobody told me anything. Nobody told me. The question is, why didn't the Prime Minister ask?
This was a Prime Minister that promised to be different, but being forced to the Commons to explain away the Mandelson vetting scandal has thrown his government into crisis and raised real red flags over Keir Starmer's judgment. The scandal has hollowed out his number 10, set his government against Whitehall and left his MPs in quiet despair. There may not be a smoking gun today or appetite to move against him from MPs so close to critical elections, but it leaves an already embattled Prime Minister weaker still. Keir Starmer said his piece. On Tuesday, the microphones handed to Ali Robbins, the former Foreign Office chief, sacked by Starmer over Mandelson and now summoned by MPs to give his version of events. With Robbins poised to come out fighting, the PM's not out of the woods yet. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, as you can see, Beth Rigby is with me now. Beth, I mean, look, Peter Mandelson has obviously haunted this government. Do you sense anything kind of materially different this evening in terms of the mood of MPs and the confidence they have in the PM?
Well, look, the first thing to say is that the Prime Minister said there in the Commons it was staggering that he did not know this information, but many of his own MPs and certainly the opposition were making the point that they think it's staggering that he did not pay more attention to the appointment of Peter Mandelson. And actually, there's many MPs that will go back to the original sin of putting this guy back into your government in the first place when it was known that he had links with Epstein post Epstein's conviction. And that he had been let go from 2 cabinets of previous Labour Prime Ministers. So the red flags were already there. So it goes back really to the original judgment. But on today, there's no smoking gun here. As we were talking about last week, the question really was, could it be proven that Keir Starmer knowingly misled the House, that he knew things about Peter Mandelson that he kept from the public record? And he showed a clear timeline of events here in which he said he was not told. And actually, allies of Robbins have also said that this is what Ali Robbins, the former Perm Sec of the Foreign Office, will say. But in terms of how bad is it for Keir Starmer, it's not good for a Prime Minister that promised a government of integrity to do things differently, to be accountable in the service of the public, to have to come to the Commons to defend the fact that he says he did not mislead the House, to give Kemi Badenoch the ammo to put him in the same box as Boris Johnson. I mean, that must sting for him. And then on the question of MPs, look, they are shortly going into elections. They need to pull together. They need to try and keep as many councillors, as many seats in the Senedd, in Wales and in Holyrood as they can. But the mood is dire. Of course it's dire. It's another crisis. It's off the agenda of cost of living. It looks like a government in crisis. It looks like a Prime Minister who's not in control of events. He keeps blaming everyone else. One said to me, the vibe in the tea room is of resignation. It's not mutinous, but it's a bit like having a slow, chronic disease. Another said the mood was miserable. A third said it was very, very quiet on the benches and even Uber loyalists were silent. But I think at the moment, Ali, MPs are looking to the local elections. There's nothing material in this that kind of would precipitate a move against Keir Starmer, and they're working out potentially what comes next. But, you know, there is the endless question about, but who might replace Keir Starmer? And there is not a clear front runner at the moment. You've got talk about Angela Rayner, you've got talk about Wes Streeting, there's now talk about whether or not the rules of the NEC, like who is on the National Executive Committee, whether they can change the makeup of that committee over the summer in order to try and bring Andy Burnham back, because he's got to be approved by the NEC to be able to stand for Parliament, and he was obviously blocked for Gorton and Denton by-election. So look, it's sort of rumbling away. But has there been a killer blow to the Prime Minister today? No, there has not.
And where do we think this goes from here? Because it looks like the Tories are going to push for a debate on this.
Well, it's just been announced in the Commons, just as you came on air, that there is an emergency debate on Mandelson and the vetting process tomorrow. So that's obviously difficult for the Prime Minister, and I guess there will be more questions again. But critically, there will be more potential ammunition in that debate, because Sir Oliver Robbins, the head of the Foreign Office that has been sacked by the Prime Minister, is giving evidence to MPs at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So the PM's had the mic today, but Ollie Robbins, you can see him pictured there, he is going to have his say. And I understand from sources and allies of Ollie Robbins, he feels very aggrieved. He feels that he followed the due process, he did the right thing. The Prime Minister had signalled that he wanted Peter Mandelson in post, despite red flags being raised in due diligence by the Cabinet Office before this developed vetting was carried out. And so he will give his side of the story, and then potentially that could create more ammunition for opposition MPs as they go into that emergency debate. So it's going to be another big day in Westminster tomorrow, Ali.
Big day tomorrow, and you've got to go because you're doing a special edition of your podcast.
Oh, we are?
Yeah.
We're doing an emergency. I think we should all be banned from saying that. We are doing a special... we're doing a special episode tonight, and also Harriet Harman, of course, was the chair of the Privileges Committee that looked into the whole issue around Partygate and Boris Johnson. So she really does know her stuff on this. So I'm going to go and ask her what she thinks.
Be sure to listen to that. Thank you so much, Beth Rigby, our political editor. A little earlier, I spoke to Cabinet Office Minister Nick Thomas-Symonds. Nick Thomas-Symonds, thanks so much for talking to us. Something we were really struck by today in the chamber was that towards the end of the Prime Minister's statement, when he was answering questions, it was actually quite empty. There were not many Labour MPs left in there. Has he lost his own party?
No, he absolutely hasn't. And look, during statements, particularly lengthy statements, MPs do have extraordinarily busy schedules. They do tend to ask their questions, and then, of course, they wait for a few more, as they are required to do in the House of Commons, and then they do move on and do other things. I don't think that's an indication of support for the Prime Minister at all.
Are you finding it quite hard to defend the Prime Minister at the moment?
Not at all. I've known the Prime Minister for many years. He is, and always has been, a person of integrity. And I think what we've seen today is him setting out to the House of Commons the facts. He's always tried to set out to the House of Commons the facts as he knew them. And what we've seen actually emerge over the past 7 days, certainly since last Tuesday, when the Prime Minister was told about, is this quite extraordinary situation where you'd had a recommendation from UK security vetting, when that recommendation has actually been gone against by officials in the Foreign Office, and ministers have been kept in the dark throughout. I'm astonished by it.
You talk about the facts. Our Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor, has found a document from the Humble Address where Keir Starmer effectively says he was advised by Simon Case to do security clearance before Peter Mandelson was actually appointed instead of after. I mean, that's That's a bit of a smoking gun, really, isn't it? That he was advised to do it before. Why didn't he do that?
No. I mean, first of all, we will comply with the humble address in full, and that document is a part of the humble address. But this was an appointment from outside the civil service. It was a direct ministerial appointment.
Jonathan Powell said it was weirdly rushed, and Simon Case said the vetting should have been done before.
But the appointment was made. The appointment was subject to the vetting taking place. And secondly, I mean, Sir Chris Wormald...
Why did you announce it before the vetting? I still don't understand.
Well, first of all, Sir Chris Wormald, the former Cabinet Secretary, set out to the Foreign Affairs Committee last November that the way in which the appointment was made was a perfectly reasonable way in the context of the process as it was then. But let me just say this. One of the things that the government has now changed, which was not the case at that time, is that where that kind of appointment is made, the security vetting should take place before the appointment is announced. That's one of the things we've changed about the process. I think that's hugely important.
But you're following the advice too late. Why didn't you do that at the time?
Well, because at that time, the process did not require that. And in any event, the appointment was made subject to the security vetting
I'm just reading this right here. He was advised to do it by Simon Case.
Well, yes, that document was setting out that it could be done in that way, but it was also perfectly permissible, as the former Cabinet Secretary, Sir Chris Wormald, pointed out, to do it subject to the security vetting. That is what happened. But, of course, the recommendation of UK security vetting was not told to the Prime Minister, not to any other ministers either, which has been the problem throughout.
So his defence is, I wasn't told. You know, does that apply in any scenario, that defence, for the Prime Minister?
First of all, the Prime Minister has very straightforwardly today taken responsibility for the error of judgment he made in appointing
Do you think
Peter
he has
Mandelson.
Taken responsibility, or has Ollie Robbins taken responsibility?
No, the Prime Minister openly took responsibility today, and the Prime Minister has apologised to Epstein's victims as well. Quite appropriate that he should do so. But this is a very serious issue. I mean, I myself, for example, opened the debate on the humble address in Parliament back in February, as I always do before Commons debates. I had numerous officials in my room to go through this, right through the detail of it. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that those officials in any way misled me. They did not. They were giving me a set of facts. But, of course, what they clearly didn't know to tell me that day was that there had been this recommendation not to give Peter Mandelson that developed vetting clearance. And by the way, I feel it quite personally that it was not told to me, but that applies to ministers across the board. They were not told about this. I've existed in politics for many years. I'm always sympathetic to anyone who chooses to take the very top jobs and to take responsibility. But I have to say, from my own perspective here, as I say, I am somebody who has had officials in my room, gone through this, and I am deeply troubled by the fact that this absolutely crucial piece of information about the recommendation of UK security vetting was not made available to ministers, and not been available to ministers, by the way, on a number of different occasions, not just when the Prime Minister sacked Peter Mandelson back in September. You cannot have a permanent Under-Secretary of the Foreign Office who doesn't command competence as the Prime Minister of the Foreign Secretary, I'm afraid.
And lastly, is the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, going to be the man to lead Labour into the next election?
Yes, he is.
OK, thank you very much, Nick Thompson. Right, let's bring our panel in for tonight. A big evening. So we have Labour peer Baroness Hazarika and former Downing Street Chief of Communications, Guto Harry. Thanks both for being here. Aisha, what do you think the Prime Minister's position is right now? I mean, do you think if Mandelson was going to sink him, that would have already happened?
Look, I think this whole episode has been grim, really grim. And the original sin remains the original sin, which was the appointment of Peter Mandelson, who had already been sacked twice from government, but was friends with a notorious paedophile, probably the most notorious paedophile of our generation. And that is the original sin, and fresh hell seems to be unleashed from this really terrible decision, which the Prime Minister has rightly apologised for. I think it's not a great look and the whole thing looks like a massive mess. There's obviously been a lot now focused on the legalese and the process, and everybody will have a sort of common sense take on it, and then there will be what are the actual kind of interpretation of the rules. But it doesn't look good to the public. It certainly doesn't look good to people within the Labour Party. I think the Prime Minister will be absolutely mortified and furious that he is in this position. But I don't think this is going to be the thing that brings him down. Remember the last time the Peter Mandelson story flared up, Anna Sarwar, the leader in Scotland, called for Keir Starmer to resign. That was seen as quite a watershed moment. People felt, you know, you had senior cabinet ministers briefing out saying they looked over the edge of the precipice. They considered getting rid of Keir Starmer, but they decided not to because there's a war going on, because there's nobody else around. And they you know, to be fair, he's done what very few leaders have achieved in the Labour Party, which is to win a big majority after a long time. So they wanted to give him some time. But I'm not going to sort of sugar the pill and spit. It's not great. But I don't think this... I think the Prime Minister will be safe for now.
Guto, what do you think? Does this remind you of when you were with Boris
You're going
Johnson?
to trigger me now. You're going to trigger me. No. Yeah, yes, there are parallels, clearly. But the most resonant parallel is that, you know, there was a case legalistically against the main accusation against Boris. Don't want to rerun that. But the point is, it came to a point in time where his own party decided, I can't bear any more of this. And we even played, and Boris looked his party in the eye in the 1922 committee and said, what will happen if you topple me? Somebody worse will come along. We all know what happened. The party will split, will fall apart, and will get smashed in the general election. That's exactly what happened. And that put people off for a little while, but not for long. Because in the end, it got to the point where people thought, make it go away, I just can't bear this anymore. And they're prepared to roll the dice, even if they end up, in the case of the Conservatives, getting Liz Truss. And in the case of the Labour Party, I sense that moment may be here. I know, and you understand the party a lot better than me, so I don't know. But it feels like they may be getting to the point where they don't care about who said what and whom. They just think, this doesn't work, get rid of him, please.
We have a video, actually, that we want to show you. This is the benches during the statement towards the end. I mean, the Labour benches, look at that, it is quite empty. Do you think there should have been more? Has he kind of lost the party in that sense?
Well, look, I think a lot of Labour MPs are absolutely combination of devastated, ashamed, angry, you know, that they're in this. Remember, there are really big local elections coming up on the horizon, very important elections in Holyrood and the Senedd. People are out, councillors are out, Labour MPs are kind of wearing out their shoe leather right now, working really hard, trying to convince people to bolster their local councils, keep their members of the Scottish Parliament or the Welsh Assembly, trying to talk about the good things they've been doing, cost of living. You know, we've had actually some good results on waiting times going down in the NHS, and now all of that is overshadowed again by this kind of stench of Peter Mandelson. So I think a lot of Labour MPs just are absolutely crestfallen by all of this, and Guto's right, they want it to stop. And they want to be able to have the big fights about the things that they got into politics for, which is big bread and butter issues, not having an endless carousel of shame around Peter Mandelson.
I think there's one thing that is more personal, and it goes to the core of Keir Starmer. He never won an election by being a visionary, by being exciting, by being funny, all the things that were true about Boris. So he still had some of that in the bank when bad stuff happened. Keir Starmer won because people thought he's boring, but that means he's straight. That means there won't be chaos. That means process will be followed. And after what we've had over the last few years, we'll settle for that. So when you vote for that, there's nothing else there. It's just going to be due process, and due process doesn't follow. And then this guy says, well, nobody told me. So, well, what did you ask, you moron? I mean, that's where we're at. And I think the truth is that this was a case of ask no questions, I tell no lies. And the civil service are in trouble because they clearly did not, it seems, pass on a crucial piece of information. But nobody around the Prime Minister bothered to ask. So that, again, makes it look like we're really badly governed.
Yeah, and obviously tomorrow we're going to get Ollie Robbins' version of accounts. Which
it's also his birthday tomorrow, I believe. It's
Ollie Robbins.
Today.
Is it today?
Today,
happy birthday.
Happy
birthday, Ollie Robbins. Goodness. Wow.
Well, I hope he's going out for dinner after. Right, thank you, guys. We will be back with you shortly. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. As Labour MPs meet following the Prime Minister's statement, we'll ask whether Keir Starmer can keep his party on side.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Parliament and joins us now. John, I believe you've had your ear to the door at the Parliamentary Labour Party. What have you heard?
Bit of a gloomy mood there, as you might expect. It came immediately after that lengthy statement and question and answer session. The Prime Minister, what was that, 2 hours, 25 minutes? That finished at 5 to 6, PLP was at 6. It was Darren Jones who was sent by the Prime Minister to try and smooth over things and soothe the nerves of rather jittery Labour MPs as this Mandelson row drags on for days. And of course it's going to drag on for a few more days yet, because the Speaker has granted Kemi Badenoch's request for an emergency debate tomorrow. Then of course PMQs on Wednesday. Mr Jones told Labour MPs it was deeply frustrating that this Mandelson row had distracted from all the government wanted to talk about, tackling the cost of living crisis and various other achievements that he claimed Labour had introduced since they won the election. He had to face quite a few questions, 6 or 7 from Labour MPs on this subject. He then went into a long explanation of the vetting system in the Foreign Office, said it was out of date, it was different from other government departments and so on. But his main message was one of deep frustration. And Labour MPs are not in a great mood after today. You've been talking, I know, about how the Labour bench is really thinned out in later on during that marathon statement by the Prime Minister, with claims that whips were texting MPs saying, "Get back in the chamber." Well, The Tories obviously have got their tails up tonight because they've got that emergency debate. They can keep up the pressure. The Prime Minister, well, many MPs believe he's on borrowed time. I've just been talking to one Labour MP who said to me, if Starmer does go, it won't be just over Mandelson. It'll be over everything else, all the other things that he's got wrong and that he's failed to inspire people, and of course the dire opinion poll ratings and so on. And of course everything points to those elections in a couple of weeks' time, and that will be when he faces in much more peril than he is now, although things are not great for him tonight. It was a lot of MPs wanted the Prime Minister to go to that parliamentary Labour Party meeting, but he didn't. He sent Darren Jones instead. I wonder if he'll do the same thing tomorrow for the emergency debate. Quite likely, I would think.
John Craig for us in Parliament this evening. Thanks very much. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, we'll get reaction from Reform UK.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here. In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
I bet right now you often find yourself asking why. Why was a certain decision taken? Why did something happen? Why did they say or do that? I'm Neil Patterson, and it's my job as a journalist to find out why. Just explain why.
It's a difficult one.
Well, I mean, it's massive.
It's a very, very severe situation.
So if you want to make sense of this complicated world, Sky News' new podcast, This Is Why, is your daily fix. One story every day, and we can find out why together. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, as you can see, we still have our panel and Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor, who today revealed that the Prime Minister ignored advice from his Cabinet Secretary not to announce the appointment of Peter Mandelson before vetting was completed. Keir Starmer was repeatedly asked about that in the chamber this afternoon.
Lord Case, the then Cabinet Secretary, told him this process required security vetting to be done before the appointment.
Yep. Was he given advice by Simon Case, the then Cabinet Secretary, that the necessary security clearances should be acquired before he confirmed his choice for US Ambassador?
The Prime Minister has twice rebuffed, first the Leader of the Opposition, then the Leader of the Liberal Democrats, when they said that the then Cabinet Secretary's advice to the Prime Minister was to get the clearance before the announcement.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to try again. Why did the Prime Minister choose to ignore the advice from the then Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case?
I understood the procedure to be that the appointment was made subject to the security vetting. That's what I was told. The question she raised is the question I raised in September, which is why I asked Sir Chris Woolmold to look at the process, and in particular, he looked at the advice, the letter from Simon Case, to answer the question: was the process followed? And he gave me the answer that he thought right, having concluded that process.
Sam's still here, and we'll come to our panel in a moment. But Sam, first, I mean, this story, is on pretty much every paper website. It's obviously been picked up in Parliament. Why is it so important, and what did you make of the Prime Minister's response?
Why I think this matters is because Keir Starmer, in the last few days, since sacking Ollie Robbins as the top official in the Foreign Office, did so because he said security was so important, because failing the vetting was something that would have, if he'd known about it, meant that he didn't employ Peter Mandelson as the ambassador. So clearly, it is a huge priority, except back in 2024, we learn that the Cabinet Secretary then, Simon Case, was saying, look, do the security clearance and then appoint him. So it seems like back then, first of all, Keir Starmer ignored that advice, so due diligence wasn't properly done. But secondly, it seems like the security vetting was of a lower priority than just getting the name out the door. So there does seem to be some dissonance there, which I think is quite telling, and I think that's one of the reasons it got picked up across the Commons chamber. I did think Keir Starmer's answer was intriguing, to put it mildly. What he does is he said, look, I got a subsequent Cabinet Secretary to look at the whole thing, and he basically cleared what I did. Well, that's Chris Wormold. Chris Wormold did a report into everything. I've got that report here. And I have to say, Ali, when you read it, it isn't quite as straightforward as that. On this whole matter, Chris Wormold just says it would usually, the security vetting process will usually happen after a job offer and before an individual takes up post. So he sort of notes in a casual way the way it did happen, but he neither says that that's the right or the wrong thing. It's great Mandarinese, this, but what it doesn't do is say, as Keir Starmer sort of implied in the Commons chamber, you were definitely right to do what you did. So I'm not sure that this is the great defence that Keir Starmer made it out repeatedly, time after time in the chamber.
Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor, thank you so much. Well, we're joined now by Reform UK Home Affairs spokesperson Zia Youssef. Thank you, Zia, for being with us. Firstly, just give us your reaction to what you heard from the Prime Minister today in the chamber.
Well, can we just be real about this? Anyone watching this programme, imagine you're running a company or you're hiring someone for a job, and you've got a candidate coming in who has already been forced to resign from government, let's say, forced to resign from a senior position twice, and is widely renowned and known in this country as, and I quote, the Prince of Darkness. Now, how much of a keen interest would you take in this individual's vetting report before appointing him to the most glamorous and prestigious political appointment in this country? Everyone watching this programme understands what's happened here. Keir Starmer has rammed through the appointment of Peter Mandelson. It obviously shouldn't have happened. He stood up in the House of Commons today and announced that he wanted to, quote, take responsibility for it. What does taking responsibility actually mean? It means bearing some personal consequence for the actions. And I put it to you that, look, I'm 39 years old. I can't remember a time in British politics when two serving members of Parliament were booted out of the House of Commons by the Speaker of the House for calling the Prime Minister a liar. And I obviously lived through Boris Johnson's prime ministership, a man who didn't exactly have a great relationship with the truth. So, look, Starmer, I think, is clearly no longer actually running the country. It is backbench MPs and other senior cabinet ministers who are doing it. But I think British people are quite rightly absolutely aggrieved, flabbergasted and angry, as they should be, because it is evidently one rule for Starmer and his mates and one for everybody else. And I want to make this point too, that remember, only 1 in 5 people eligible to vote in the last general election actually voted for Keir Starmer. Yes, it was a walloping majority in terms of seats, but that's a vagary of our system. The only reason Starmer is Prime Minister...
Can I just ask you, how do you know that the Prime Minister willfully misled the House?
Well, all I can go on is the basis that this is an executive. This is the most important, most senior, most powerful executive in the country. Look, I've run a company myself. Anyone who has made any form of hiring decision knows what it's like to actually go through a process where you are assessing a candidate on the merits for the job and then going through their background checks. That is something many people in this country have gone through. And if you haven't gone through that process, I'm sure you can imagine it. Remember, this is a man who was hardly an unknown entity. This is a man, as I said, who had been forced to resign from government twice and was known as the Prince of Darkness. And that's before, of course. That's before we've learned about these emails where on the day, this is a really important point, on the day that Jeffrey Epstein was released from prison, Peter Mandelson was sending emails saying this was, quote, Liberation Day.
But I suppose
Liberation Day.
Today
a convicted paedophile was released from prison.
Sorry, I know you've got limited time. Today we're talking about the vetting process. The Prime Minister says he didn't know didn't get this final level of vetting. I mean, the things that you're talking about, those are things that we already knew, aren't they?
Exactly, and that's the fundamental point here. What I'm trying to say is, let's just be real about this. Let's see the wood from the trees. And again, I put it to everybody watching this program. Imagine you were hiring somebody for any sort of job of any sort of responsibility, let alone ambassador to the United States for the United Kingdom. You would take a keen interest in the vetting process, which is why everything that Starmer is trying to do here, wriggle around and squirm his way out of this by referring to things like process, firing civil servants, and then claiming he's taking responsibility. This is the height of shamelessness, and it's obvious that he knew exactly what he was doing. As Sam Coates's great reporting actually today, he's made the point quite clearly, and I think really importantly that clearly, Starmer wanted Peter Mandelson to be Britain's ambassador to America, and the Foreign Office made it happen. That's essentially what has happened here. And far from taking responsibility, Starmer is firing civil servants and failing to take responsibility at all.
OK, Zia Yusuf, for Reform for us this evening, thanks so much for coming on the Politics Hub.
Thank you.
OK, let's bring our panel back in, shall we? Aisha and Guto, been waiting patiently during those interviews. Aisha, what did you make of what we heard from Reform? And, do you think the opposition parties will be able to seize this moment?
Well, look, as I said before, it's not a good look for the Prime Minister at all. The original sin was to appoint Peter Mandelson and, agree with many of the points that Zia Yusuf made, although I think it's a little bit rich, Reform lecturing anybody on vetting, given that they have routine nightmares with some of the people that they are putting forward to run for office. But, I don't want to make this a kind of party political point. There is absolutely, everybody is agreed and lots of people in the Labour benches are agreed, and the Prime Minister has apologised, rightly so, for appointing Peter Mandelson. But of course, this is going to be a moment for the opposition parties to make hay. This is the kind of blood sport that is politics. And as Guto said earlier, the Prime Minister really attacked Boris Johnson in terms of probity. So now everyone is going to be, there's going to be a lot of heat on Downing Street. And I thought it was interesting, Ed Davey today, because Ed Davey treads quite carefully around Keir Starmer, because who knows, there may be a coalition down the track or something. But today he was actually quite aggressive with the Prime Minister, which I thought was quite interesting.
I just want to read you, I've just had a response from an Epstein survivor to the Prime Minister's words today. She says, to the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, I'm just reading part of it, I, Lisa Phillips, am an Epstein survivor. And she goes on to say, I'm not here for apologies. Words, including those made after appointing Peter Mandelson, are not enough. Survivors like me are demanding transparency, accountability and action. So I'm asking you directly, if you're truly sorry and if you truly care about survivors, then act. Your decision will send a clear message to victims of abuse everywhere. Will you stand with survivors and launch a full public inquiry, yes or no? So it's quite interesting from an Epstein survivor.
And just to sort of pick up on the fact that I said this at the time, Peter Mandelson should have been made to go to America and actually give testimony about what he knew in terms... now, he fully denies any wrongdoing, but he was around Jeffrey Epstein. They were obviously very good friends. And I said that at the time, but certainly that's something that Keir Starmer could call for as well, for Peter Mandelson to volunteer to go over and work with the victims?
On the victims, Keir Starmer snookered. There's no doubt about it. He chose to do this, eyes wide open. Enough was known at the time. So the truth about all this is, having made a controversial decision to appoint Peter Mandelson, the only credible option was to own that, to essentially do a version of set a thief to catch a thief. We know he's not a saint. We know he's pretty odious. We know he's hung out with really bad people and that he's a bit dodgy. But look at the man in the Oval Office. This is what we need to mark this crazy, unprecedented US president. Now, if he said tonight, it turned out it was intolerable. He was even worse than I thought. But I did that, eyes wide open. I think he'd have more sympathy than saying, the Foreign Office didn't tell me. I didn't realise this. The vetting procedure was shocking. Sort of, he's got to own the mistake, the call he made, because there was a justification for the call. It was a tough one.
And they said it was a risk
It was a really, really tough call. But it was a defendable call to send a dodgy person to cover a really dodgy president. He cannot now pretend that all of this was a surprise to him. And I think what will seal his fate is, you take on the senior mandarins here, ooh la la, they'll find their way of getting their own back. One way or the other, there'll be drinks had in, not working men's club, in the posher dining clubs of London tonight, where revenge will be served cold at some point.
Thank you both. We'll come back to you. Well, straight after the PM addressed the Commons, I caught up with MPs as they spilled out of the chamber.
How on earth are we in a situation where in such an important appointment, the Prime Minister isn't told about a security vetting failure? That is crazy. The Prime Minister's recognising that, updating the House, and we fixed the rules.
Where was the curiosity inside number 10 to say, should we check this out? So I think, putting Ollie Robbins outside the tent or throwing him under the bus, whichever you want to use, doesn't satisfy me that the matter's been properly dealt with.
The credibility, the faith in government, all these things are what he's bringing down. There's only so many times he can be mealy-mouthed. We were told that we would see a Keir Starmer angry today, that he was furious about this. I saw a man with shaking hands, desperate to defend himself.
He told the House repeatedly full due process was followed, not according to Simon Case. He did not follow the process, and so he appointed someone who was a security risk to our most senior and serious diplomatic posting.
So do you think the Prime Minister should go then?
I do. I just think he's run out of road.
He appears to be the most uncurious former head of Director of Public Prosecutions in history. And, I say that with an element of flippancy, but it's a serious point. Well, why did he not ask these questions when it was on the front page of a national newspaper?
Lack of decision, lack of curiosity, lack of grip. The systems that we've had for decades all failing. And so, we need something to change.
A whole range of views there from MPs I spoke to in the House of Commons. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, we'll look ahead to Ollie Robbins' appearance before MPs tomorrow.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, what next for Sir Keir Starmer after a bruising 2-hour session in the Commons? He denied misleading the House, but 2 MPs were removed for calling him a liar. Also tonight, we'll hear from the reality TV star Louise Thompson as birth trauma campaigners take their fight to Westminster. And the government bows to pressure, announcing the ban on phones in schools will be made law. All that and much more on the UK Tonight at 8 o'clock.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you. He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay. Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them. Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island. The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages
across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first. Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound. Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out. The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here.
In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
I bet right now you often find yourself asking why. Why was a certain decision taken? Why did something happen? Why did they say or do that? I'm Neil Patterson, and it's my job as a journalist to find out why. Just explain why.
It's a difficult one.
Well, I mean, it's massive.
It's a very, very severe situation. So if you want to make sense of this complicated world, Sky News' new podcast, This Is Why, is your daily fix. One story every day, and we can find out why together. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, the scrutiny continues in Parliament tomorrow morning when Ollie Robbins gives evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Sir John Whittingdale, Conservative MP and former Culture Secretary, is a member of that committee. And as you can see, he joins us now. Our panel, Aisha and Guto, is still here as well. John, what are we expecting tomorrow? This is a big day, isn't it?
It is a big day. What we've heard so far has been the official line of the Prime Minister and the government, which is basically nobody told us. If we'd known if this would have never have happened, it's a failure by the Permanent Secretary and the Civil Service not to have kept us fully informed. Tomorrow is the opportunity for Sir Ollie Robbins to respond to that and to say whether or not that really is the case, and if it is, why he decided to overrule the recommendation of the vetting agency and also not to tell any ministers about it.
And we could get some new information that could change things, couldn't we?
Well, I think we certainly could. What's more, we understand that Sir Ollie Robbins will no longer be a civil servant as of tomorrow morning, so he's not constrained, and I can imagine, since there seems to be an effort to point the finger at him and blame him for this, that he may well wish to put his side of the story.
What are you going to be asking him?
Well, I'm going to be asking him, in a sense, we're spoilt for choice. There's so many questions about this. But in my view, the most basic question is, was he aware the detail of the recommendation of the vetting agency that Peter Mandelson should be denied deep vetting? If he was, why did he decide it right to overrule it for what is the most important appointment the Foreign Office makes, just about? And thirdly, if he took that decision, why did he not consult or indeed even inform other members of the government or ministers?
Do you have any sense of his state of mind coming into this? I mean, he's been sacked. He must be quite annoyed.
Well, there have been various reports of his friends talking to the press who say that he's very angry, upset, which is rather understandable. I mean, he is a long career and distinguished career as a civil servant, and essentially, he's been made to carry the can for this, and it may well be that he feels that that is unfair and wants to say so.
I wonder if our panel had any questions, because we've got an insight here into what's happening tomorrow.
Well, you've been a minister. If a civil servant did not tell you a crucial piece of information like that, wouldn't you be slightly annoyed with the civil servant?
And in that sense,
doesn't the problems of Ollie Rollins actually exonerate Keir Starmer, technically speaking, notwithstanding all the things we've said about what a lousy Prime Minister is?
Well, there's some debate about the extent to which the law allows civil servants to inform ministers, although I think we are of the view that actually, particularly of something as serious as this, ministers should be informed because the civil servants have a duty to make sure that ministers don't mislead the House of Commons, even inadvertently. And yes, I mean, ultimately, we are governed by elected ministers, not by civil servants, and therefore a decision of this magnitude, in my view, should be taken by ministers.
Aisha?
And John, you worked with Margaret Thatcher back in the day, and we've spoken a lot about how Margaret Thatcher really was very curious about what was going on across the civil service and across different departments. How do you think she would have handled a situation like this? Even if ministers were not, civil servants were not going to tell her information, do you think she'd go digging?
Yes, definitely. And, you know, famously her saying, which was in different circumstances, but it applies, which is officials advise, ministers decide. And that has always been the principle of our constitution, that things should, you know, ministers are accountable firstly to Parliament and secondly to the electorate, and therefore it's only right that they have the final say. It does seem utterly extraordinary that we are told that on something as important as this, and it's the national security of the country, and the most important representative of our country, you know, at the country of our closest ally, you know, for ministers not to be even told seems utterly extraordinary.
And just to end with a final thought from you both, Aisha, is tomorrow, how important is it for the Prime Minister? Is it existential?
I don't think it's existential. I think there's a slight danger of kind of sort of being slightly, you know, gilding the lily on this too much. It's incredibly serious. A lot is going to depend on what Ollie Robbins says, but to pick up on something that Guto said, which is incredibly important, governments getting things done rely on a good relationship with the civil service, and I really hope that this doesn't fundamentally damage that relationship between ministers. I was a civil servant before I became a special advisor and now member of the House of Lords. That relationship is so important. Ministers do not achieve things if they don't have a good team relationship with the civil service, so I hope this doesn't fundamentally rupture that.
Guto.
I fear we end with the worst of all worlds, that there isn't the clear shot that finishes off Keir Starmer. So we end up in a situation where there's a Prime Minister who can't work with the civil service, who's lost the support of his own backbenchers, who long ago lost the country. And there are big decisions that Britain needs strong leadership for at this point in time. There's war, there's challenges here at home. And we are handicapped by a Prime Minister who is completely finished, but still there.
And a final thought from you, brief final thought from you, John.
Well, I mean, I think whether or not Keir Starmer survives, he's been very, very seriously damaged. And I agree, actually, both with Aisha and with Guto. With Guto, I mean, obviously, this is a critical time with all these challenges in Ukraine, in the Middle East, etc., and to have a Prime Minister so badly flawed. But also, Aisha's right. I mean, I work very closely with my own officials, and that relationship is critical. And I think the former head of the civil service has gone on record saying this is the most serious crisis in terms of relationship between the civil service and government ministers that he can ever recall. And that in itself makes this incredibly serious.
OK, thank you very much, John, Aisha and Guto, for all your time this evening on a very significant day in Westminster. That is it from us tonight. We will be back tomorrow. As we've been saying, we're going to be hearing from Ollie Robbins in Parliament at 9 a.m. tomorrow. The programme is on at 7 p.m, so we will have had time to digest everything. So do watch tomorrow evening. Up next, it is UK Tonight with Matt Barbette. Thanks so much for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.